Yasas. What happens when you take two vibrant brothers that are descendants from the Greeks in Constantinople, embracing their American roots, and then ask them to serve up rich tales of traditions, cuisine, childhood memories, and a hearty dose of humor? You're about to find out. This is Baklavine Banter, your passport to all things Greek.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Baklavine Banter. I am Petraki, and you are?
Soto.
Well, folks, listen, we have a great episode today. We have comedian from New York City, known for her humor and also her mathematical accounting skills. Please help us welcome to Baklavine Banter, Ellen Karis.
Hi, thank you. That is what every entertainer wants as an intro, is for people to have her do their taxes. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. I'm trying to get away from that, that stigma. Okay,
Stigma. Well, you know what? I'm hoping we can use this as a deduction.
I think I would have rather have a long record for shoplifting than have a CPA license at this point that I don't use, but I have. So thanks, everybody. No, yes, that is a true statement. But yeah, I'm a comedian. I also act. And I have a podcast, and I have a children's book,
Yes.
an author, and and all that kind of stuff. So I try to be really well-rounded.
Yeah, multi-talented. So
I don't know about that. I'm just throwing everything against the wall and seeing if anything will transpire.
Strategy.
Yeah, good strategy, exactly. So you were born in New York City?
I was. Yes. I still am. Yes.
Whereabouts were you born?
Manhattan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not Astoria, Manhattan.
Okay.
In the city.
City, yeah.
City, yes.
So
yeah, it's funny. Like, I wonder if people around the country realize that when we say the city. Like, we all know what we're talking about, but I don't know if anybody.
I just had the conversation with somebody about this. I have a friend of mine here who is an electrician who looks like a cross between Al Pacino and Andy Garcia.
Oh God, that's awful.
He grew up in Brooklyn, right? When we go out, I met him at our favorite watering hole. When we go out and somebody says to him, because his accent is, that's how I associated to him. Because across the dining room, I go, somebody's from New York. When you say to him, you're from New York, he goes, nah, I'm from Brooklyn.
Right.
And so I was telling somebody, it's very territorial which of the five boroughs you're from. If you say city, the implication is Manhattan.
Right. But I think we only know that language, and people like in Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, But after that, I don't think it's they don't get it. But anyway, yes, Manhattan, yes, the island. Honestly, I haven't really gotten off this island. I've pretty much stayed here.
It's a great place to be.
Because I know where else is there to go.
Yeah.
So for you growing up, you were talking. You made the differential to say, "Hey, I'm not from Astoria," but how often would you go in Astoria as being a Greek household?
So my father's family is from Brooklyn.
Okay.
So and exactly what you said, they go Brooklyn. And my mother's family lived in Washington Heights, which is actually where I had lived.
Okay.
And then they emigrated to Jersey.
Okay.
Because they went to Fort Lee. Because that's what happened in those days.
Right.
Is that like one Greek went to Fort Lee, and then the others followed.
Right.
Like the one Greek said, "There's a huge shop right here," and you don't have to have your washing machine and dryer in your kitchen. You can have it in another room.
Right.
And then they all got excited, and they went across to Jersey. That's how I see it in my head. But so believe it or not, though, we really didn't have any relatives in Astoria,
Okay.
which sounds crazy. We went to Astoria for the good feta, the Kalamata olives, the filo, the right spanaki for the spanakopita,
Right.
the right noodles for the pasticho,
Yeah.
So that's when we went grocery shopping. So and then you guys will probably remember this. There was that big wedding hall, the Crystal Palace. Wait, was it not
Crystal
the
Palace?
The Crystal,
Yeah.
right, the Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
So I went to weddings there.
Yeah.
And here's a little crazy story. So, like I mentioned, I'm an actress, or I use the term loosely. But one of the first things I ever did, it was background, and I was in the first season. I can't remember which episode, like episode 8 or something, of The Sopranos, and they had filmed the entire first season of The Sopranos before they had ever aired it. So when we were there, we didn't know what it was. We heard, The Sopranos, we thought it was singers, right? We had no idea, even though it was like all these Italian looking people. Greeks can look Italian. It was, as a matter of fact, the casting call was, you got to look like a Goomba,
Okay.
like a real, or a Gumara, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'll never forget. I had to be there 5:30 in the morning. I wore this red dress. I brought jewelry. I had like red lipstick on, like as butana as I can get. And it was at the Crystal Palace, which I think probably at that point, like was closing or was close to closing, But I just thought it was so funny that the first like big thing that I did was there, a place where like as a Greek, everybody got married there. Everybody had their wedding reception there from New York, from New York.
So did you survive the episode?
I did. As a matter of fact, it was so long. It was 5 a.m. and we got out at 11 p.m.
Wow.
And I wasn't, of course, this was in my beginning, so I wasn't SAG yet, the actors union.
Right.
And so you're non-union. I think I made $75 for all of those hours.
Wow.
And I think I ate like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then maybe they fed us like spaghetti later.
Wow.
Like that was it. But I had the most fun, and I did make the cut. So if you ever see that episode, it's a wedding episode, and it was when they were getting busted by the feds, and they were all like in a circle talking to each other. And I remember like James Gandolfini being there, but again, like the show hadn't aired. I didn't know who these people were. There was a few people I recognized. Michael Imperioli I recognized because he was in Goodfellas.
Yeah.
So I'm in one scene. Actually, you can really see me where I'm dancing next to Adriana and Dre DiMatteo and Jamie Lynn Sigler, Meadow, and then there's another scene. I know where I am, like in the background, dancing with somebody and stuff like that. So. But so the Crystal Palace.
That's awesome. I could just imagine everybody like getting on set and being like, "How you doing? Hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right."
That's awesome.
It was kind of hard to hear what they were saying, but other than when it was quiet and there was like a speech. But anyway, so anyway, that's the answer to your question of story. And then I had relatives in Long Island, and everybody really stayed in the tri-state area, which there's so many differences, obviously, from the way that we grew up versus like now, families, and it makes me sad, but families like move away from each other, like now, like let's say we're the kids, like we would never, we would never think to like go to another state. Like now people just move, Austin, wherever, Florida. And I feel like we're losing that closeness. Cause I feel like, I know people go, well, you can just get on a plane, but like, you're not going to get on a plane once a month. You're not going to get on a plane when you want to go over for dinner, right? Like how many like Sunday dinners did we have with our families and stuff like that? So, I feel fortunate that I lived in a time where, people pretty much stayed close
Yeah.
to each other.
Basically, people would
Yeah.
just knock on your door and, hey, did come over for a few hours.
No, you just make
Yeah.
plans. It was easy. But when you have to make plane arrangements and who's going to pick you
Yeah.
up and when you're going to come, that's like that's a trip.
Yeah.
That's not really coming over for dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. So we joked earlier about you being a CPA. Now, was that something? Were you told what you were going to be growing up? Was your life planned out for you?
So my parents are born here.
Okay.
My grandparents, so I'll just to give you, because as Greeks we're like, where you're from,
Yeah.
and again we know what that means,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So my father's father is both my father's parents are from Mani.
Okay.
They didn't know each other. It was when they came
Got
here.
it.
And my father's mother actually had come here pretty young.
Mhm.
And then my grandfather, I think, got kicked out of Mani, which is almost impossible,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
To get kicked out of Mani. But so, and then my mother's parents were from Cyprus,
Okay.
but again, they came here separately.
Mhm.
So, my parents were all, and their siblings were all born here.
Right.
So my father went to college, actually went to NYU,
Mhm.
and my father actually was he had like 27 jobs, but his main job was as a teacher.
Okay.
He did a lot of teaching, but he was a gym teacher for a long time, phys ed. He did a lot of driving, although he was the worst driver. So he did a lot of teaching after school kind of
Mhm.
things. And he had a lot of jobs. And then later on, my mother went and became, she was actually into accounting. So my
Okay.
mother was like a math genius. So education, of course, was very stressed. Like there was no option.
Yeah.
There was nothing. And it's funny because when I think about, and I think about it probably more than I should, I have a lot of like shoulda, coulda, woulda moments,
Okay.
right? Because I didn't start this till like a little later.
Sure.
But there was no way, first of all, me personally, I didn't really feel my creative juices then. And that's not something that I was nurtured in. I'm not blaming my parents. It's
Mhm.
just like nobody in my family, either side, has any artistic talent whatsoever.
Yeah.
So that wasn't going to come from there.
Right.
But I did, certainly as a little girl and stuff, like I had an imagination. I watched way more TV than any kid should have.
Mhm.
I wanted to be on a sitcom. That was my dream.
Mhm.
But I was good in math.
Mhm.
And one of my mother's brothers had become a CPA
Mhm.
and was doing really well. And I loved business. And, again, the playing field was different, right?
Yeah.
It was very like lawyer, doctor, you went into advertising. I mean,
Mhm.
there was no blogger, there was no tech,
Yeah.
although if there was as much tech as there was now, I mean, that's not something that would have interested me. But so I studied accounting. I went right into college. I got an accounting degree, and I worked for an accounting firm. I had got a job actually before I even graduated.
Mhm.
And I did like that sort of like recession proof
Mhm.
type of,
Sure.
because no matter what, like you always need
Yep.
accountants, always. And so I did that. And then I decided to go to get my MBA, like shortly thereafter, because I had friends that were working on Wall Street. And I'm like, well, we're working the same hours and they're making 10 times more money than I am and having a whole lot of fun and going to like the US Open.
Right.
So, so I went down that road.
Yeah.
And I worked for a large investment banking firm as a derivatives analyst.
Uh-huh.
So I did that for a while. So it wasn't in the sales side. It was still sort of in the finance
Yeah.
side. And then when I was doing that, I did that for quite a while. And then I was like, okay, I'm done with school. Like I got everything. Like I got the license. I got my parents now can be proud. They can say, I
Uh-huh.
got this, I got that. And and of course it's a feeling of accomplishment for
Sure.
myself,
Sure.
obviously. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done. Now I'm going to do something fun. And I took an improv class for the first time in my entire life, never, ever. And I loved it because it was so freeing, because it was so
Mhm.
different from what I did as a job.
Mhm.
And also, just to get back to our Greek roots, as much as we are expressive people, there is sort of like still, again, growing up, it's gotten different, but like there was a lot of things about like watching our P's and Q's, you know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah.
And don't do this, drepeseus olus,
Mhm.
don't embarrass us,
Mhm.
just all that. Like there's just things that we were brought up, like we
Oh,
just
yeah.
didn't behave that way because we didn't want to embarrass our parents, or ourselves, obviously. So it was really nice to just like, let it
Yeah.
out. And I always loved movies, theater, and actually my Thea, who's my nuna also,
Mhm.
she, my mother's sister, she never had kids. She was a teacher though, so she loved kids.
Mhm.
She just, whatever happened. And she was the one that when I was 4 years old took me to my first play at Lincoln Center.
Okay.
And I remember just being in the audience and just loving it, loving the energy, loving the theater, loving when the lights went down. I mean, I still do to this day. So it was there.
Got it.
It was in me, but I just wasn't in the environment where it would be cultivated.
Yeah.
But you know what? This was my path. This is what Orthodos wanted me to do, and I have to just think about it that way, because if not, you just go out of your mind.
100%.
It's hard. It's hard enough as it is.
So how did we get into using your Greek upbringing to kind of for your comedy? Did that come naturally, or is that something that kind of evolved into that?
It's a great question. So what was happening was, so I took this improv class, and then I'm like, I love this. I took an acting class, film
Mhm.
study, scene study, this, that, whatever. And it was great. And I feel very lucky that I grew up in New York City, because like all of that was available
Sure.
here. And so I studied with this acting teacher, and I'll never forget. I was studying with her for like a year, and she would have us improv something from our life every week as like a warm up
Mhm.
exercise. So one of my sisters was getting married at the time,
Okay.
and it was like drama. Every week was it was this, and my grandmother's like, "Oh my God, we didn't invite Yanula," and I'm like, "Well, who's Yanula?" And she's like, "The woman that does my hair." And then oh my God, the big controversy was my brother-in-law wanted a DJ and my sister wanted a band, and it was like, forget it. So I would, let that out every week. And her name is Penny Templeton. I will always be grateful to her. And she says to me, okay, I have two notes for you. One is, I hope you talk about your Greek family in your stand-up comedy. And I'm like, I don't do stand-up. And she's like, you don't? And I go, no. And she goes, this is what she said. She goes, get some. I'm like, okay. And then the second thing she said to me, which you'll appreciate, is, this is so funny with the whole thing with your sister's wedding. You should write a one-woman show about a Greek wedding. And I'm like, I go, who's going to want to see that? That's like, who's going to, and then, of course, the movie, and
Yeah.
then we know what
Yeah.
happened. No, good for her. No, I'm only kidding. So Minzy Levis. Okay, so seared in my brain. So that night,
Yeah.
I went home. I'll never forget. I took a cab home, and I was sitting in the cab, and I'm like, stand-up comedy, stand-up comedy. But I loved stand-up comedy,
Mhm.
but I never thought I would do it. And so I was like, all right. And I went to the comic strip,
Mhm.
which is fun. I live on the Upper East Side, so I live close to
Yeah.
it. And they were doing a class. I looked in backstage, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And I saw this ad, and I was like, oh, I'm going to take a class. And I took a class. I didn't even know how to write a joke. I didn't know anything,
Mhm.
and other than like what I saw on TV. But here was my logic. My logic was that there were so many stand-up comedians that got sitcoms. So I
Sure.
thought, okay, because that was my goal. So if I become a stand-up, then maybe somebody will see me and they'll want to have a sitcom based on my crazy Greek family. And so that's how it evolved.
Got it. Okay.
So as I was developing my act, of course, like I talked about that, and I feel like that was also my way of coping with some of the drama and just and and not necessarily, I mean, obviously, things that were deep, but just even like little things. Like I just really feel like it could be just a little something kati mikrutiko,
Yeah.
and it just became this whole like we got to tell everybody, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. I can't believe she wore that. Like that whole everything is just magnified
Yeah.
10 times in our family,
Yeah.
at least it was mine. So I definitely use that. And I mean, it is my identity, although it's interesting because even though I grew up around Greeks and I had Greek friends and I
Sure.
went to Greek protestant school and all that kind of stuff, though, but when I went to high school, I went to a public high school, and then I went to college. There weren't really any Greeks. I went to an accounting firm. I was like the only Greek. They were Jewish or Italian. So for a really long time, I didn't really connect, and I didn't really go to church. So at that time, so it was kind of nice to like all of a sudden, like, yeah, God damn it, I am Greek, And so that again, it was just kind of interesting how it all
Yeah.
something that I was sort of like not really not ignoring or just not even paying any attention to, like came back. So
Yeah.
yes, so of course I would talk about my Greek family and my yaya and this and that and just some real crazy things. And we were talking before we went on air. So like I remember I could not sleep over anybody's
Yeah.
house. There was no sleepovers. Like
Mm-mm.
I couldn't go to camp. There was
Mm-mm.
no camp. Like
Mm-mm.
you know what camp was?
Mm-mm.
Yaya's backyard in Fort
Mhm,
Lee, New Jersey.
mhm,
Okay,
mhm.
we used to come back from
Yeah.
school from summer break. We would all be around in the classroom, and the teacher would go around and go, "Where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to? Where'd you go to vacation?" And so again, Greek parochial school. So we go around the room, and everybody would be like, "Oh, I went to my tia's in Thessaloniki.
Mhm.
Oh, I went to my nuno has a house in Castoria." And they're like, "Eleni, pupi says si si to Calokeri," and I'd be like, "I went to my yaya's house in Fort Lee, New Jersey." It was so pathetic. So,
But
um,
totally understand, though. Totally
you know,
understand.
but that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I had a boyfriend in my 20s, and I remember telling my father I was going to go on vacation. You would have thought I came home pregnant at 16.
Are
Like
you
it was the same reaction.
are you crazy? Who is this man?
Then they said, what are people trying to say? That they're he didn't talk to me. I mean, it was insane. I'm like, Dad, first of all, I am paying for it. Like, it's not
Yeah.
like I'm not asking to pay for it. Like, so it was just, I go to accounting, like I go to, jobs. I was an auditor. I was a professional. I wore a suit and this and that. And then here I come home and I'm like 10 years old.
Yeah.
It
Exactly.
was just so weird.
So would you say then comedy then help you find your identity then and kind of reconnect with your
Totally.
roots then?
Totally. And I'll tell you what else it
Yeah.
did. So, as I was, going along on this comedy journey, I was taking a writing class. I did a writing group a couple of years into it. And there was a manager there that he managed comedians. And one day we're talking, and he says to me, "Ellen," he goes, aren't there like any Greek groups that you can do your comedy?" Or like he had a Jewish client,
Okay.
and he's like, so and so does these shows at temples, and like, do you know anybody? And so there was a woman that I knew that was Greek, that was in PR, and I reached out to her. And so I basically, I paid her, like I hired her. She was she passed away, unfortunately, quite a few years ago, but she was very sweet. So she kind of helped me, like the Annunciation on the West Side was having a talent show. So I got on that and I was able to do like 4 or 5 minutes. And then she knew Olympia Dukakis. So we went to a show, and then afterwards, a bunch of women went out to dinner at Avra, the original Avra that had just opened up. This is like how long ago it was.
Yeah.
And we were like in the back room, and I did like 10 minutes. And then there was like another opening of a restaurant. Actually, Olympia came to that, and I did that. And, so, I mean, it's slow.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to find your voice. But at some point, after doing this and starting to get hired, and I worked with Basil, who I know you had on and stuff. He's a good friend of mine. And I wound up meeting him, and I opened up for him and all this. And as I was going on this journey and I was meeting all these new Greek people, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm look what I've missed. I was totally reconnecting. And then little years later, I was feeling like I was really missing something in my life, which was our faith and Christ. And I was, making not some great choices and decisions. And it kind of got me back to church, because I would go to these churches and I would see these people and their great relationships. And I'd meet, the priests were wonderful. And I was just like, I need to come back to this. So yes. So it totally brought me back, which is really, really wild.
So I'm assuming when you started going and doing stand up in, clubs in Manhattan and stuff like that, was there, and I'm sure you'd see other comedians who were probably well known there, who were probably headlining. Was there anyone in particular after you did your stand up came and said something to you that kind of validated that, hey, you're on the right path?
I think it was really more of getting comfortable and finding they say find your voice. And it's true. You really have to find your voice. First of all, it is really the hardest profession. I'm not discouraging anybody. I'm just, and there's a few people maybe that get lucky. And the scene now is different because with TikTok and Instagram, it's a whole different thing. I mean, the good news is you can show yourself and showcase yourself out there all different ways. The bad news is there's a zillion people doing it. So I don't remember like that per se. I knew, I used to run around the city. There's a thing called bringer shows. So you, like when you start out, you do a lot of open mics, you do shows where you have to bring audience. I think the same thing, probably happens in music, and then you get a spot here, you're there, and at a bar and at this. And then for me, I mean, for anybody, even though Manhattan's a great place for comedy, and now Brooklyn has like gotten its own scene, which I don't really know that as much about. And then you got to like break out, and you got to go to Long Island, you got to go to Pennsylvania. I mean, you got to do like the road gigs and stuff like that. And there's all different levels of that, right? There's some guys and girls that'll get in their car and they'll drive, 20 hours to a gig and stuff like that. Like that, I wasn't going to drive in the middle of the night to the middle of the country. Like that wasn't happening as a woman for me. That I didn't ever feel comfortable. I mean, if somebody wanted to fly me someplace, I'll go. But I did travel around. I tried, with other comics and stuff like that. I think when I think it really turned for me when I realized that when I was on stage, I can, if I'm not doing well, I can bring it back, or I'm never going to run out of things to say. I got more comfortable saying things off the cuff. So it really takes a long time. But definitely when I was running around more, like I've been somewhere, Chris Rock popped in, Jerry Seinfeld popped in. I mean, it's exciting to see them and watch them and everything. But in my life, as far as like famous people, I opened up for Sebastian Maniscalco.
Oh, wow.
Back in 2013, he was just on the cusp of exploding. I didn't know who he was. And it was at a club called Uncle Vinny's in Point Pleasant. And I remember going there, and the owner said, "This is the last time I'm going to get him to come here." It's a small room. He goes, "Because in 6 months he's going to be at the Borgata and the big theater and blah blah blah, whatever." And he was very nice. He was very intense. The owner, club owner, introduced me to him, and I was like, "Oh, nice to meet you," and blah blah blah, and I'm Greek, you're Italian, and I said, "So Dino's going to introduce us, and I'm going to do 20 minutes. Tell me what you want me to say, and if anything you need." And then we did 2 shows that night.
Okay.
And I'll never forget. And so he's there, and he was like, "Okay, good. Okay, all right. So you're gonna go up. You're gonna do 20, and you get the Greek Italian. And I'm gonna go up, and then we're gonna do the second show, and then okay, good." And I looked at him, and I was like, "This guy doesn't want to schmooze. He doesn't want to hear my story. He was very nice. Don't get me wrong, but he was in his head, and I can understand that because." Also, too, like especially when I have to do a long set or stuff, I don't like to chat a lot either. But anyway, and that was it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna be in the corner, and if you want anything, I'm here for you. And that was it. But I really didn't get to chat with him after.
Sure.
And then I remember I had to leave because I took New Jersey Transit and I had to get the train. But I opened for Drew Carey,
Okay.
who came. And we did like 5 shows.
Wow.
That weekend, and he came down. It was at a hotel, so he came downstairs. He watched, all my sets. He was really nice and hilarious, very funny. And a few people like that are kind of famous in like the comedy scene.
Sure, okay.
Jimmy J.J. Walker,
Yeah.
Dynamite,
Yeah.
and he was really nice, and he had like stories, and he was best friends with Freddie Prinze,
Sure,
and
yeah.
I remember sitting there going, "My God, like this guy is a sitcom legend."
Yeah.
So that was exciting.
You're talking about, you wanted to get into all the comedians are getting sitcoms, but
Mhm.
you talk about Drew Carey and how he's on The Price is Right now and has been there for over 10 years now. And I always think a Greek comedian should get a game show. And I think they should do like a Greek version of the show Password. You remember Password?
Aristophanes.
Yes, exactly. The password, I think it'd just be amazing, just go there. The password.
We all watched that episode of The Odd Couple.
Exactly.
Well, it's funny. I have a bit that I do sometimes where I say how I watched a lot of because the Game Show Network has a lot of those shows, from the 70s and 80s. And I always wondered, because when we were kids, like there were really certainly no Greek people on TV, other than Telly Savalas, we all know. But I'm just saying, like there were no Greek.
And growing up in New York, it was Ernie Anastas on Channel 7 News.
Who's still around. He's still around. He's such a nice, I know Ernie, he's a very nice man. His picture is in every diner this side of the Mississippi.
It's on this side of the river too.
It's amazing. It's just amazing. And if like his picture isn't in the diner, you should leave. I mean, that means they got like a C grade.
Yeah.
Like you should probably go. But I remember I was thinking like what would have been like had they had Greek people on the dating game. Remember the dating game where like the original Bachelorette, and like I could just see it now, like saying who the Bachelors were, because like everybody's name was like Todd and Chad, and like Bachelor number 1, he hails from Whitestone, Queens. Exactly. He lives in his parents' basement, and he works at his father's all-cash diner. Meet Manoli, It's like Bachelor number 2. He lives in Bayside, Queens. He works at his uncle's car dealership, and he's looking for a woman that looks just like his sister. Meet Stavros. You know what I'm saying? Like 100%, crazy stuff.
100%.
I like that. I would love, So anyway, yes.
Listen, there's like there's a skit there somewhere. There's like somewhere there's a skit in there.
Do you think the I don't know if status is the right word, but the way Greeks are perceived in this country over the years because of work that you've done, Basil. Certainly, Nia, when she came out with My Big Fat Greek Wedding, was a seminal moment. I don't
Mhm.
mean that because it's a minority. I mean, Nia has the best story, if you've heard the interview, where she talks about coming to the U.S. trying to find an agent.
Mhm.
And they told her, you're not a leading lady because you're not pretty enough and you're part of the wrong minority. And she did the one woman show that Rita
Mhm.
Wilson attended, which is how Playcomb picked up on that show. But it feels like, and it could be because we're doing this show and we now have greater exposure that we didn't realize being younger, because you kind of live in a bubble, which is why we enjoy doing this, because we get to reconnect the same way you did. But it feels like you go back to the 80s talking to Basil with him being like the OG, it seems. Then you had My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and then all of a sudden you have yourself and others. You have Yanis, the comedian, and so forth. And it
Mhm.
seems like, and then we were talking about the Greek Film Festival,
Mhm. Yeah.
and some of those. We went to see, my brother and I went to see a play when we had Shelley Papadopoulos on our show,
I
who
know
was the
Shelley.
executive producer. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
know
so
Shelley. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
seems like all of a sudden this culture's on the move. And to me, and maybe I'm biased, I was going to ask you this. It seems like when it comes to comedy, Greeks are naturally funny people,
Mhm.
or our stories, which is where this my brother was talking about this podcast, our stories, even though they've been told from different people and they're very similar, seem to resonate with those that aren't Greek, even those that are equally funny cultures. Like I think what Sebastian has done with his comedy when he talks about his dad and growing up in Chicago and so forth, he sort of did that for the Italians. But do you think there's been a shift in this country over the last 20, 30 years because of some of the work that entertainers like yourself and Basil and Nia have put Greeks front and center, and then in movies and and so forth? Has that changed, or is it just my imagination just now being more immersed in it in terms of the vibe?
I've been in this for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Uh, and uh, there's absolutely been a shift. There are many more Greeks going into stand up and acting and producing things. And then, like you said, these film festivals and all of that. I think Greece, because of tourism, celebrities going to Greece,
Mhm.
Greece also upgrading their hotels
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
and just and having better PR and putting more money
Mhm.
into tourism, which has been a struggle for them for a long time. I mean, I think it's finally hit,
Mhm.
in the last few years, because I remember going to like a meeting at the boathouse. I'm gonna say 10 years ago, might be a little bit less, and they were talking like there were some heavy hitters there.
Mhm.
I'll tell you off air, and I don't know if I should name names, and it was about promoting
Yeah.
Greece. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, it's the same story and this, but you know what? It happened. It happened, and celebrity endorsements are always, even though sometimes it's like, are we really still listening to celebrities? But people are.
Mhm.
I think what Nia did, I completely agree with you. That was a bit of a turning point. I'm going to tell you something. When I started getting into this and acting business,
Mhm.
I remember agents saying to me, "You're ethnically ambiguous," and I'm like, "What the does that mean? What? I'm Greek, vre. What does
Yeah.
that mean? I know what I am. You don't know what I am. Get out of your ass. So and then of course and now, I mean, we're even in like a completely different territory, because now you see all kinds of people
Yep.
on TV and casting and
Mhm.
whatever. So I mean, it does bode well that it's not just. And I'll give you an example. I know I wanted to get into the commercial world. I was like dying to do a
Yeah.
commercial. But and again, at that time, the commercials were for women. Like a lot of redheads got them,
Mm.
or a lot like blonde, blue eyes, but like redheads were like always got commercials, and I looked too ethnic.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad that changed.
Yeah.
Of course, and the demographics are, the reality of our demographics change. But yes, in answer to your question, absolutely, no question about it. You know, so I grew up in Manhattan. There was like 2 Greek restaurants that I could remember.
Mhm.
Periali, I think, has been there a long time. I
Yeah.
think there was a restaurant called Z
Mhm.
back in the day, and then Astoria, of course, had their restaurants. And then years ago, Molivos opened, Milos, and then people were talking about Greek food like it was a new phenomenon. I'm like, what do you?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
it was insane. Like your extended friends would talk to you as if like they just discovered pasticcio,
Yeah,
and it's like
exactly.
I have that once a month,
Yeah.
So it's so wild. And then there's a ton of Greek restaurants now all
Yeah.
over,
Yep.
Beverly Hills, California, Florida is filled with them. So that that opened up. Same thing with like the yogurt. Like all of a sudden, yogurt was a Greek
Yeah, Greek yogurt,
yogurt
yeah.
was a Greek thing.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's so weird. So it's like
I
the
remember.
thing
I
that we
remember.
always knew. Yeah.
I remember telling somebody when the whole which still ranks, I think, near the top, when the Mediterranean diet became a big thing.
Yes.
I was like, I mean, there's
Yes.
you got to have jokes in there, right? Go Mediterranean diet. That's what I
Yeah.
grew up with.
Yeah.
All
Well,
I wanted,
like olive oil is good for you.
Yeah.
No
Yeah,
shit.
no
Like
shit, exactly.
good morning.
Yeah.
Like who?
I've got an IV of
My grandmother
Kalamata
rubbed
olive oil.
olive oil on
Yeah.
me when I had a stomach ache,
Yeah.
like on my skin. Yeah, I'm well aware.
yeah,
like, so
yeah. I think that's very cool. I'm glad that you verified that, because again, sometimes you think you're too close to it. And then the other thing that we talk about all the time, we talk about it with Basil, and my brother has stories because he's been to Greece over the years more than I have, is sort of that Greek magic that happens when somebody who you've never met before starts talking to you, realizes you're Greek, asks you if you speak Greek, and then from that point, the interaction, they might as well be a cousin.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh
Which
no.
is
There's that game 6 Degrees to Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
There should be a game 6 Degrees to my Gumbato.
Yeah.
Because if you talk to somebody, at some point they're gonna say, Costantino,
Yeah.
that's my Gumbato.
Yeah.
Like somewhere, but where the Gumbatos connect with each other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I remember forever, even as an adult, we would be someplace. My mother would hear somebody talking Greek, and she would go over to them like she was part of the conversation.
Uh-huh.
And I'd be like, Mom, what are you doing? Who cares? What's the big deal? I was such a snot,
Yeah.
Now I do the same thing. I'm on the subway and I see a couple and they're like, "Puta pa me, ko putelis na pas?"
Yeah.
Like, no, I do the same thing. I mean, you become your parents, you know that, right? I mean,
100%.
like, I'm totally, oh my God.
100%.
I'm totally
And I literally just came back from Greece 10 days ago, and I was in Thessaloniki, and checking in the hotel. And I don't. My game is I don't let people know up front that I'm Greek, because I like to give them that aha moment. And so the lady's like, "Oh, can I have your passport?" I give her the passport. She goes, "Oh, I got to make a copy." And she comes back and she's, "Είσαι Έλληνας, ne?" She goes, "I would never have known by just looking at you, because I was born in America." But it's it's funny because, and another funny thing is, for a little bit, my parents, when they immigrated to the country in 1970, my grandparents were already here. And like we told you, they moved in with my grandparents in New Jersey. But my parents were like, for some godforsaken reason, they decided to move to Mississippi. Now, yeah, yeah, we'll discuss that another time. Now, my brother was born abroad, so I was first one in the family to be born in the States. So I was born down there, and my mother tells the story. When my brother was born, he was very dark. So when the nurse brought me to my mother, she spoke no English, and I was extremely white. So the nurse, hands her to my mother, And my mother's poor English, the only thing she could say was, now, let me just preface this by saying early 70s, Mississippi is still burning. The nurse gave her to my mother, and my mother said to the nurse, my first baby is black. So you can just imagine, we had to give the Chevy back. We had to give the shotgun back. We had to pack up everything and hit the road, before they started burning crosses on our lawn,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm
That's
sorry.
funny. I just a story popped into my head. My Aunt Mary, when she was born, her mother
Yeah.
had a very thick accent. Her mother, she had like 7 brothers and sisters, and then
Mhm.
she came along like 20 years later. So, one of those kind of situations.
Sure.
And my aunt said when her mother couldn't really speak English, and the nurse came in to get my aunt's what the name of the baby was going to be. And her mother said, Athena. And because her accent was so thick, it wasn't
Mhm.
until after they got her home and whoever the older brother or sister looks at the birth certificate and goes, it says Edna.
Wow.
And she never changed it. And she
Yeah.
was baptized Mary. And then so they called her Mary, but it said Edna because of the accent. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Wow. That's
Yeah.
funny.
And then Mrs. Garrett ended up being the housekeeper for.
Yeah.
I did want to make sure I mention this.
Okay.
So one of the things I'm working on right now
Yeah.
is a play
Okay.
of one woman show,
Sure.
basically, and it's based on my great grandmother who emigrated from Cyprus
Okay.
here via Ellis Island.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the midst of writing it. I'm working with someone who hopefully is going to direct it. I've had this story in my head for over 10 years,
Okay.
for a really long time. So that's something that I'm excited about. It's got obviously a lot of sadness to it, but we're going to stick some comedy in there, and hopefully we'll shape it up. So I'll keep you posted on that. But
That's
it's something
awesome.
that I'm excited about doing. I'm scared because it's a one-woman show and it's very different from stand-up.
Yeah.
Doing 75 minutes of stand-up and doing 75 minutes of something that's scripted is completely different, even if I wrote those words too.
Yeah.
But I keep going back to why I want to do this, and it sort of goes back to what you were saying. First of all, she raised me. She was the nanny, right? She was my
Sure.
nanny. She was hugely instrumental in my life. She was till to this day one of the kindest, amazing women, strongest women I've ever met. And she grounded us all. And I mean, even it was my mother's mother's mother, but even my father loved her so much and felt like that was her grandmother. She was the matriarch, and she had a lot of tragedy, and never lost her faith. And back in those days, no therapist, no Xanax, no meditation, no spa. I mean, she forged ahead, and so I want to pay homage to that.
Nice.
And the story, and also to kind of educate people about Cyprus. The 50th anniversary of the invasion is coming up on July the 20th. The fact that it's still where it's at, which has such a sense of permanence.
Yeah.
She was, lost land. I mean, just the horrors. And I've been listening to, there's the Hellenic Heritage Society is doing like a 5-part podcast series on that. And they're interviewing people that are there. And a while ago, I went to a memorial, and it was on my mother's side. And there were people there that escaped Cyprus when they were like 16, 17. And I was just like bombarding them with questions.
Yeah.
because we don't really hear that much about it. So that's important to me, that people know about that situation, and also the whole immigration process. So, I mean, I don't know how political you want to get on here, but and I mean, I have no problem expressing my own views, but I
Mhm.
think, I live in New York City. I'm seeing a lot of things. What's gone on with the migrants just coming across and this and that, giving them a card or whatever, it's disgusting. First of all, we're paying for it. I want to pay for it. That's first and foremost.
Mhm.
They're not vetted. They're like nothing, and it's so the polar opposite of what it was when my grandmother came in, and how they weren't letting people in for really horrible reasons. It's like it's so turned on its head.
Yeah.
So I want people to be aware of what that was like. And the people that did come here, like our grandparents and
Mhm.
parents, came here with a purpose. I didn't glom off the system, didn't look for a handout, wanted to assimilate, yet still keep their culture. The whole thing just frustrates me. I mean, I can't walk down the block without some little woman with a 3-month old on her back trying to sell me, candy. I mean, it's just like it's looking like a third world country, which I think is part of the plot, but that's another story. So that's not what it was. That wasn't what coming here for a better life is about.
Mhm.
So there's a bit of that. Again, it doesn't get political. I'm just showing what it was like in
Yeah.
that time and what you had to go through.
Sure.
So, you did have to come with a job lined up. Forget about like walking around the street looking for one. So that, and then again about our faith. It's not going to be all religion, but just how her faith got her through everything, which
Yeah.
is amazing. So I will keep you posted on that.
That'd
So
be
it's still a
awesome.
work in progress,
That's
but
awesome.
but that's something that um, I love doing stand up, and it's fantastic. And I do regular private parties, corporates, bridal showers. I do all kinds of things. And then I've got the Greek arm. Um, but it's funny because, I'm sure, Basil's the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
I think in some, I don't want to say the word pigeonhole because again, I'm grateful, but like people know us for that, and that's fine. But that's honestly just a small slice of what I do.
Yeah.
And getting into these Greek churches and having them bring you, it's a huge deal. And I'll tell you why. Because like sometimes I'll get a call from somebody like, oh, we'd love to bring you whatever, but it's not up to one person. It's whether it's the AHEPA, whether it's the
Yeah.
Philoptochos, whether it's a PTO, they got to have a board meeting. They have to be able to
Mhm.
afford it. They have
Mhm.
to feel like they're going to sell enough tickets to make money, or
100%.
whatever. So it's like always like it's a long process.
Yeah.
It's not just like a slam dunk. So
But you know what? Real quick, I just want to touch base that like you said, you are an author, and the name of the book that you wrote is
yes.
"Godparents in the Orthodox" or "Special People, Godparents in the Orthodox Christian Faith." What motivated that?
So I am also a Sunday school teacher
Oh boy.
Oh
at
wow.
the cathedral. Yes,
Ugh.
15 years.
Oh boy.
Uh,
Is
and
it?
it's been crazy. It's been crazy. And it really started because my sister uh, wasn't taking her daughter to church when she was young because she had also a little baby.
Mhm.
And she's like, I can't, I can't like get it together. I can't, can you help me? And this and that. We live near each other. And I brought my niece to Sunday school, and it was chaos. And I was like, I don't want to leave her here because I might not be able to find her later and bring her home. So I stayed in the class, and then I didn't want to sit there like a giria. And I'm like, can I help you? Can I get, I don't know, the water, snacks, or whatever? And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, then you get sucked into the vortex, and the next thing you know, like I'm involved. But it was fine. But I mean, listen, it's been a blessing. It got me more into going to church. It got me
Mhm.
into learning, meeting people in my community. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't have kids, but I got to meet a lot of the parents.
Sure.
So the inspiration for the book was twofold. One was I wanted to teach the kids about their godparents because I'm a nuna 9 times over because I'm always available. And it was important to me. Like I wanted to teach them about name days and
Sure.
godparents and this and that. And I could not find any resources about being a godparent at all, at all. So I was like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a children's book. And my aunt, my Nuna, who I talked about, was a teacher. She was also a grammar school librarian.
Okay.
So, and books are very important to her. And she taught all of us to read and to be disciplined students. So it's a bit of an homage to her as well. And I dedicated the book to her. And I have to tell you, it took a long time because I'd never written a book before. I had to get an illustrator. She was great. We worked together for a long time. I gave her pictures of people, but when you do a picture book for kids, like the text has to match the picture.
Sure.
So that was, it was a learning experience. I published it myself on Amazon. And I always say this, like, it's not a moneymaker at all. It's part of my brand. I'm proud of it. I sell it at shows and stuff like that. People enjoy it. And, I'm really glad I did it, though.
That's great. That's
it was
great.
one of those projects that I really wanted to do.
One of the discussions I had when we had Basil on, we were talking about Greek Easter, and are you one of those who wears, like, you dress for the nines for Easter? Do you wear your fur coat no matter how warm it is outside? Because it's like a fashion show. It's like going to the Met Gala sometimes.
It is. Well, I'm on the Upper East Side, so it's like that. We call that Sunday.
I say that all the time, even living out here in Tucson, when we go out to eat.
Oh, yeah.
We go out to the one of the best restaurants in Tucson. It's called Vivace. It's an Italian restaurant. The owner, Danny Scordato, his father's first restaurant was in Patterson. So we instantly connected because I busted his chops because he has chicken meatballs on the menu. And I said, Danny, what self-respecting Italian puts chicken meatballs on the menu? But anyhow, so you go out to a restaurant that is considered fancy. And again, I know it's Tucson and it's hot, but I am so used to on the East Coast that, you go out, regardless of where you go, you're dressed to the nines, that it's always interesting. And that's why this joke with Basil was funny when my brother mentioned the procession for Easter, and people are out there in furs and heels.
And this year it was warm. It was, it was in May, our Easter. It was late.
Right. Well, I know. My extended friends were asking me when Greek Easter was, and I said it's in August. It's in August.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, that's so funny.
Be any later? I mean, really. So I mean, well, again, I go to a very prestigious church, and everybody always looks beautiful, so it's fine. I do have a fur coat that is 100 years old. As a matter of fact, I probably have to get rid of it because it's like the furs are splitting and stuff like that. I will say, again, growing up in New York, I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, every woman had a fur coat. That was like your rite of passage.
Yeah.
Like you could not go to a wedding or anything without a fur coat, or else they'd think you were the cleaning staff, right? So, but I don't see as many fur coats like there used to be. You know what I mean? It's just it's just sort of like not a thing, like not a thing anymore. I mean, I think they're great. I have nothing against them. It's just like I just don't see it as much. But yeah. I mean, Easter is a big thing. Well, what's even funnier, really, is all the people that are there that are never there, and they come, and the thing is, like, that for that half hour, you're convinced that they're really like the real deal, and then you never see them again. It's like the wildest thing.
Yeah.
So
the church that we were at, we used to have this priest, and it really would upset him because, you're there Saturday night for Easter Mass, and around 11 o'clock, all these people would just come roaring in,
right.
And at midnight, little after midnight, he would stop Mass and be like, okay, for those of you who came just for the half hour, whatever, you can leave now. And he would literally stop Mass, and those, they would all leave because they would leave regardless, but they would interrupt the service. And I think that was a little bit,
right.
And he was very old school that way, but he'd end it, and then, Mass would end at 3 a.m.
Right.
And then, you go down to the downstairs for your little margarita. And
I mean, if you really, want to have the whole experience, it's talk about a journey. I mean, it's the Lenten journey.
Yeah.
And you this is the Sunday school teacher coming out in me, right? So like I have the kids put our Lenten goals. I try to tell them to, just, we're going to pray more. We're going to be more introspective. Maybe, now we have to talk about social media. We don't maybe do that as much, be compassionate. I try to take it as it's really like an opportunity to reset yourself. And I don't care if I insult anybody or whatever, our religion is the best. I mean, it is so rich. It's the first. You're welcome. And, I wouldn't change it for anything. So it's what you put into it.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
Sure.
I'm not judging. I'm just saying it's whatever, you put into it. I will admit that other than when I was a teenager and I stayed with my mother, about 10 years ago was like the last time I stayed till after for the liturgy. I mean, it really is nice if you can do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get a little tired, or we go to my sister's. We'll have golemano with the kids, and
Sure.
and then call it a day. But speaking of that, so I always say that if because there's two schools, right? There's the Avgolemano people, and then there's the Margheritza people.
Yeah.
And if they were on Survivor, the Margheritza people would survive. They would eat the Avgolemano people.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
Yes.
It's the Hatfields and the McCoys of the Greek world.
I really do.
That's what it is, We're not Margherita people,
Right.
but you're talking about. So my mom a few years ago moved down to she lives down just north of Atlantic City now. So this year I went down there and we went to church Good Friday down there.
Is that the Egg Harbor church?
No, we went to the one. Yes.
Egg Harbor,
It's the
right?
Holy Trinity.
Oh yeah, I've spoken. I mean, I've never performed there, but I've spoken to them.
Yes,
yeah. And Vineland is another church.
St. Anthony. That's St. Anthony's.
Okay.
Okay. God, I'm turning into my grandmother. I know all the churches. Oh my God. But anyways,
welcome to my world. Yes.
Yeah. But so we go there. It's a small church. So we sit down. We sit towards the back, and we did the procession, and then we come back, and my mother goes, "You think we should just leave now?" And I go, "Well, why don't we sit for 5 minutes, okay?" And my mother is 80 years old, so she's a little weeble wobble, and so we sit back, and they start reading off, the names of the dead, after the procession. So my mother's there, and we're like 10 minutes in, and all she's like, she sends out she's like, and in Greek, she's like, "Oh, how long is this gonna keep going on for?" And I'm like looking around, Mom, inside voice, like everybody just heard you. Right. She's like, oh.
That's funny. Oh my God.
And there's part of your routine. I saw you make a joke how you're saying how your mom is proud of you, how you're a comedian, and how when she introduces you, she says, "Oh, this is my daughter Ellen, the lawyer."
Yes, that is correct.
And in a lot of ways, that's our mother as well. Because my mother says, this is our mother. My mother calls this show The Stupidity. She goes, "Are you doing another of these vlakias?"
Vlakias. I was just going to vlakias. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That you make some of these vlakias,
Yeah.
And, even though she says that and she'll go and watch it, and of course, like a typical Greek mother, she criticizes it from top to bottom. She's the biggest fan because she constantly asks for, when's the next episode?
Oh, see.
So it's very funny. Yeah. So
well, Mom, listen, with especially Greek women. And again, I'm there. Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't want, it's like my nieces always are like, "Don't judge." And I'm like, "Don't tell me. Don't tell me." It's called an opinion. Don't be such a lightweight. They're weak. Kids are weak. It's all that water. Too much water. What's with the water? I didn't have water till I was 23. Why are they always carrying around water bottles? Stop with the water. I mean, you live in Tucson, maybe, but my God, that's so ridiculous. They're overhydrated. That's why they're on the rock.
You know what? I'm going to tell you something. It's not about the water. It's about the
container.
It's about the having the the social status of having your Stanley mug there to
Your
say,
Yeti,
"Oh, look,
your Yeti, yeah.
yeah, your Yeti or your Stanley. Oh, look, I paid $49. Are you kidding me? $49 for here. Take a Dixie cup. Walk around with that."
I won't say that I'm this big save the planet person,
Yeah.
I'm not one of those, or like, if you drop a a wrapper out, well, I don't like litter. I don't like litter, but like, if you put something in the garbage that belongs in the recyclables, some people go nuts,
Yeah.
or they're composting their eggs or some ideas that I will never do. But I find it insane that I grew up drinking water from the sink.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now, like, I went to my uncle's last week, and he gets like cases. Obviously, he's my uncle. He's older than I am, but he's got cases of Fiji water, and then like they drink one, and then they throw it in the garbage, and then like at the end of the day, there is like all these plastic bottles of water. I'm like, we grew up drinking it in the sink.
Yeah.
Especially, New York City water is really good, but everything is like filtration. Like you have a filter. I know Jersey water is not good, but you have a filter.
Exactly. Ellen, are you performing anywhere anytime soon?
I am in. I'm trying to think because I kind of didn't really schedule too much for myself stand up wise this summer, so I can work on the play because I had a lot of running around in the winter and the spring, which was great. I am in a play, believe it or not a Greek play, but a play in this one act festival.
Are you doing Annie?
Annie, right? Yes, I'm playing the dog. It's at the Secret Theater in Woodside, Queens.
Okay.
It's a one act festival. It's called "You Can't Teach a Fish How to Whistle." Wait, you can't teach a fish to whistle. I'm actually playing a Jewish woman, which is not really that much of a stretch. I mean, other than the Jesus thing, but just the cadence and whatnot. And then I have a lot of stuff coming up in the fall. At a couple of churches and clubs and stuff like that. Just go to my website and follow me on Instagram. Everything is about likes and followers. I'm on Instagram at Greek Chick Comic, or Facebook, Ellen Karis, Greek Goddess of Comedy. And then I've got my podcast called Sweet and Salty with Ellen Karis. I either have guests or I do sort of like a half an hour, 35-minute rant. I do tend to do some politics. So, but it's very blunt. That's my politics. I just call it like I see it. That's all.
Blunt is good.
I take no prisoners. That's it.
Yeah, neither does our mother.
I tell you, that's what happens. You turn it. The minute that you join Philoptohos, that's it. It's all over.
It's all over.
That's it. You're done. You're done. Yeah. You're never going back. You're never wearing skinny jeans again, ever. Ever.
Well, listen, Ellen, thank you for taking the time to sit with us today. We really appreciate it.
It's such a good time. Thank you so much. This was awesome. This was amazing.
We love to have you on at a later time, talk about the one-man show.
Yeah, absolutely.
But best of success and continued success with everything you're doing. And
just do me a favor. Just spread the word. I'm available. I also do Macarias. If anybody's interested and needs a comic, Macarias.
Yeah. And maybe you can do the grand opening of Titan in Astoria when it reopens.
You have no idea.
No, you have no idea. You have no idea. You have no idea.
Oh my God!
I think when I'm waiting for it for the date to reopen. I've been waiting patiently. I think we should plan that we should go together.
You want to do that?
100%. And I think we should film
it. We should film it.
100%. Because here's my thing. Now, as a kid, I remember the commercials for Titan. Okay, they've had that building for 40 years. You're telling me in 40 years they couldn't buy that building? Now, come on, that's just me.
I don't know. I don't know if
I don't know either.
I don't know any of the back. All I know is it was closing.
Oh yeah,
I was freaking out, and I will tell you. I will PSA to everybody, okay? Because I will get that late night, like night before Christmas Christmas night.
Yeah.
Can you make some spanakopita? Can you make a spanakopita? And I am wandering around Manhattan for Filodo, and I need Apollo number 7 or
Mhm.
Contos.
Mhm.
So Kronos, excuse me. And so because I used to go to Titan and I would get a bunch and just stick it in the freezer, you
yeah.
know. So, but all of it, all the good stuff, all the feta, you
Oh,
know. It's
yeah.
like I get the Xeni feta. It's
Oh,
like
yeah. Yeah.
feta.
Yeah, I
So
think I think we did in a part of our, what was it, our first episode is right
First
about when
episode.
they closed, and we did an entire piece on it because we had gone, I think, the year before
We went last year, yeah.
and bought a bunch of stuff, and then that got announced, and then it was like, oh my God, yeah, you can buy on. I mean, for me, I can buy online, but unfortunately, the shipping goes through the roof, so I can't really benefit from it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but then the news came out that they're going to be up the road opening up a new one, and so on a couple of these episodes we mentioned it, and we're like, we have to reach out to them because we're so
Yeah.
glad that they were able to reopen, but we should definitely try to do something.
yeah,
Yeah, well,
I think that's brilliant.
listen, we're there. Listen, I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna come into the city. I'm gonna pick you up, and then
Okay.
we'll drive over. I gotta tell you, they were open during COVID. So again, I told you I live in literally. I live in northern Jersey, so
right,
I'm
okay.
10 miles. I'm like 12 miles from the GW Bridge. Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So usually on a typical day, non-COVID, it would take me 50 minutes with traffic to get into Astoria. No lie, during COVID, less than a half hour, I was in Astoria.
Right.
I would it would take me less time to shop than to get there. So within like an hour, 75 minutes, I went, shopped, and I was back at home. It was amazing. You know, you sit there with your mask and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
you know, like put it
Yeah.
down. Yeah,
Yeah.
remember one time I went and I told the guy like I had to get like, 4 pounds of feta cheese. I got like 3 pounds of cassetti. So at the end, I tell the guy, oh, I need like 3 pounds of basturma. So he sits there and he looks at me and he goes, he puts his head down. And the guys in the deli section there were like, come on, man, it's the we're Greeks. It's like the Olympics. Are
Right.
turning it out.
Right.
Well, listen, Ellen, thank you for your time once again. We
Yes.
appreciate you.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll have you on a show sometime soon again.
Great. Perfect. All right. Keep
So
in touch. Yeah, let
for
me know when this airs too, so we can.
100%, 100%. Don't hang up. Don't close it out
Okay.
when we finish.
Okay.
So for Baklava and Banter, I am Petraki. That is Soto. And thank you, Ellen Karis. You've been an excellent guest. Take care, everybody. Be good, and we'll talk to you soon. Yasas.
Yes.